Legendaries. So many legendaries. Oh my god, legendaries as far as the eye can see. But which ones do we actually want? I'm going to have a look at the ones that are going to be useful to Retribution Paladins in Legion. Now it's worth noting that of the 15 legendaries we can potentially get, some of them are spec specific, so some of them will only be useful to Holy or only be useful to Protection. Some of them are specific to armor type, so they're available to all plate users, for example. Some of them are available to a much wider range of classes. Now it doesn't necessarily mean that if the effect on it is useless to us, that the piece of gear is, because if it's the first legendary we get, we'll probably equip it anyway because the item level itself will probably dictate that. Remember that necks and rings don't have primary stats on them, they just have stamina and secondary stats, so what is good for a caster can be good for us as well. Now one of the more interesting pieces, and the first one I wanted to try out, is Aegis Yalmer, the Armed Guards of Ore. Now what this one does, as you can see, is any attack that would kill you, it's like a cheat death mechanic. It puts on you a Shield of Vengeance, which is 200% as much as a normal Shield of Vengeance. But it reduces you to 1 health. Well, let's face it, you've just died anyway, you should be at 0 health. And this can't occur more than once every 3 minutes. Now this is going to be quite useful for synergizing with equality, you would think, if you are going to use equality, because remember that talent means that you use it and it does damage to 4 nearby mobs, and the amount of damage it does is 1.5 times the amount of health you've lost. Well, if you've got about 1.5 million health, and probably about that quite soon, and you've on 1 health, if you can fire it off really quickly, that's 6 million health you're dealing out across 4 mobs. The Vengeance Shield itself will be a decent amount. It should keep you alive long enough for you to heal yourself up as well. But what I wanted to know is, let's say I take Divine Intervention as well, how will it interact with each other? So what we can see here is I'm going off to an Elite, hoping it can kill me quite quickly. Unfortunately, Elite it may be, but it's not actually doing a huge amount of damage. It takes it some time to kill. But what we notice, and what is really interesting here, when the killing blow is struck, both effects don't trigger. In fact, you can see here, it's my Divine Intervention that triggers first. I get a Divine Shield, and it's not the wrist. So I wait for my shield to wear off, and then I decide to carry on letting it hit me. So it hits me, deals another killing blow, and this time it's the ring, the wrist that procs. So you actually get 2 bites of the cherry. You can sort of die twice. So this could be quite interesting, and it might be quite useful on some fight mechanics. And of course, if you are able, and this is always the big if, I mentioned this in my Retribution Paladin update this week. If you haven't seen that, I'll put a link there. It's a big if that if you can every 3 minutes find something to reliably suicide on, then this could be quite powerful. Would be especially powerful in an AoE situation. The next one of interest is the Cloak, the Whisper of the Nath Razim. Now what this does is when you use Templar's Verdict or Divine Storm, it gives you a proc which lasts for 4 seconds. If you use another Templar's Verdict or Divine Storm within that 4 seconds, its damage is increased by 25%. Now, a couple of things about this. Of course, in theory, it's very powerful. You do have to be careful to make sure you've sort of got a couple stacked. I mean, you don't have time, for example, to use a Templar's Verdict, build your Holy Power back up, and then use another in all likelihood, or you may do. The other thing to note, the extra damage that this does when you can take advantage of the proc might change your decision making as to which ability you use between, say, Templar's Verdict, Divine Storm, or Justicar's Vengeance. Now, of the 4 rings, Liadrin's Fury Unleashed is the really good one. This means that while Avenging Wrath is active, we get 1 Holy Power every 2 seconds. I'll tell you what, using this, it does very much feel like you want to be spending Holy Power whenever you can. It's certainly not going to be quite the same as I normally do, which is build your Holy Power, use your Judgment, spend, and then in the downtime build again, because you might overcap. So there's probably going to be some Holy Power spenders used outside the Judgment window, but that's all good. This one is really, really nice. I mean, 1 holy power every 2 seconds. That's an extra 10 holy power on a normal sized Avenging Wrath. And then, of course, when we upgrade the artifact to get potentially up to another 10 seconds maybe of Avenging Wrath, that's going to be extremely tasty. I really am going to want this ring. If you're using Sanctified Wrath, of course, then it can only mean you're going to build up to your full 15 stacks all the more quickly. Onto a more defensive-minded item, there is a neck called Pridaz, Zavarix Magnum Opus. Magnum Opus is a book, isn't it? But anyway, this one gives you a damage shield. If you don't take damage for 5 seconds, then you get an absorb shield, which counts for 25% of your health, lasts for 30 seconds. If it doesn't get used up, or if it gets used up, then again you get another stack, a timer counting down from 5. If it gets down to 0, again you get another little absorb shield. This could be really nice on any fight that isn't constantly ticking out damage. So maybe not so good on a Tyrant Valari type fight, but on most types of fight this could well be quite good. Could save a lot of damage. And if you don't have any of the DPS ones, or maybe where DPS isn't so much the issue and survival is, this could be a really, really nice addition. When it comes to the Chain of Thrain, the plate belt for Paladins, what this one allows you to do is when you cast a blessing on someone, whether yourself or someone else, it will heal them for 15% of their maximum health. Now in the case of Retribution Paladins, that means either Blessing of Freedom or Blessing of Protection. Now, although you'd be unlikely to use this if you had any of the previous legendaries I've mentioned, it doesn't mean to say it wouldn't see some use if it was the best you had. After all, Blessing of Freedom is on a 25-second cooldown, and perhaps for PvP or soloing, it might save your life in a tight spot. The final item that can offer up any sort of damage is Justice Gaze, the helm. What this one does is it causes our Hammer of Justice to deal damage to our target. It's not something you're going to try and feed into a damage rotation, I wouldn't have thought. But again, depending on which legendary's got, or indeed if you're going to be on a fight where these stuns are used, it may be useful. Or even for soloing, of course, where you might use regular stuns or indeed PvP. There are some healing related ones which wouldn't necessarily be completely useless in the absence of any other legendaries. Tyr's Hand of Faith, so gloves that reduce the cooldown of lay on hands by 70%. So rather than a 10-minute cooldown, which makes it an extremely emergency use, it gives it a 3-minute cooldown where you might be a bit more liberal with it. Ilterendi, Crown Jewel of Silvermoon, is a ring, which means that when we cast a single target healing spell, well, Flash of Light, we can potentially refund up to 50% of the mana cost based on how much life the target's missing. It's not going to come in very useful, but when we're just spam Flashing of Light and us up, we might get one more off because it does do a very weak amount of healing. In terms of other odds and sods, we've got Heathcliff's Immortality, which is a ring, which means if you use Consecrate, then studying it means you'll take 4% less damage. It's not that great. 2 reasons. One, at the moment, as it stands, we're unlikely to use Consecrate. It's just weak. The second is that 4% less damage is not all that significant, really. Certainly not using over... Well, you would use it over something where you get no effect whatsoever, but there's not many legendaries below this on the pecking order. Agrimar's Stride, boots that mean that we increase our movement speed by the same amount as our haste. Hooray! Baseline movement for us. I think it's the only place we're going to get it from. Reasonably enough, at the moment on the alpha I've got about 9% haste, so that would be an extra 9% movement speed. Given that our toolkit might favour haste, we might end up stacking it up. It might be reasonably useful, but again, it's not it's unlikely to be as powerful a damage increase as some of the earlier ones I mentioned, but still could be useful in some situations. Sefu's Secret, another ring. This time looks like it might be of more use in PvP. Successfully applying a Disorientate, Fear, Incapacitate, Polymorph, blah 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 blah, because it's for all classes. To an enemy grants you 70% increased movement speed. So maybe we can stun them and actually get up to them. It's our gap closer for PvP, I think. or maybe even for solo stuff, quite useful as well. Uther's Guard, risks that increase the duration of non-greater blessings. So that's Blessing of Freedom and Blessing of Protection for us. Again, going to be quite low on the pecking order, but better than nothing. At least it has an effect that will see some use. Perhaps again PvP where it'll see more use. Finally, there are 3 items that are Paladin spec specific but not for Retribution. There are some Holy Shoulders, which means that anyone healing the Holy Paladin will also do a certain amount of that healing on their beacon target. You've got 2 tanking items, a chest that means that using Avenger's Shield, all the hits it gets reduces the cooldown on your Guardian of Ancient Kings, and some legs, which means that Avenger's Shield will jump to additional targets and do increased damage with each jump. So those are all the legendaries that we can potentially obtain and my evaluation of them. Of course, there are only a very small number of legendaries that we will really want. However, it's not the case that not only do we have a small chance to obtain these, but also a small chance that it be a useful one. They are all farmable to a certain extent, and the implication of that is that specific legendaries will drop off specific mobs. Blizzard have also said that they have a higher chance to drop off harder content. So what it sounds to me is that each specific legendary maybe has a small chance to drop off a particular non-elite mob in a particular zone, and maybe a higher chance to drop off certain elite mobs, again out in the world, and possibly a higher still chance to drop from mobs maybe in dungeons. I don't know, that's me reading into it. We don't know exactly how it's going to work. And just one final thing, don't forget that we can only wear 1 legendary at a time. So if we have multiple legendaries, we have to choose which one we want for a given situation. But there is, it's possible through the order hall, once you've developed it, and it will take quite a while to develop it, it is possible to be able to wear 2 legendaries at some point in the future. So hopefully you found that useful. If you did, usual procedure, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. If you've got any specific questions, don't forget to put comments below, and don't forget to share it with anyone else you think might be interested. Until next time, I'll see you later.